Hello and welcome to the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show, where this week we are super excited to have the head football coach at Cortland High School, Mr. Mike Barfield, on the show. Coach has a tremendous variety of experience at multiple stops, and one of the reasons I was super interested in having Coach on as well is he's also a CSCS, which is something that we've talked to a lot of guys this season, some strength coaches. So I thought, what a great topic to have Coach on. Maybe talk a little bit about his strength conditioning background, but he's going to dive into a topic we've talked about with some ADs during this season 3, where we have discussed kind of elevating your career. What are interview questions? Maybe you can expect different things of that nature. So really excited. Coach just obviously went through the interview process, completing his first year over there at Cortland High School. So I think he'll have a lot of great insight. I know a ton of you. I know in Arizona, the coaching carousel is spinning like crazy, and I'm sure that is like that in many other states as well. So before we dive into that, though, I want to take a minute to remind everybody the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show is brought to you by School Funder. School Funder, the only online fundraising company in America that lets you keep all of the money your team raises. Teams all across the country would never willingly give away 20% of their victories, but they always give away 20% of their proceeds to even 25% in fundraising. Not sure why they do that when they can call the good people at School Funder. That's SCHOOLFUNDR.org. Let them know the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show sent you, it will help the show. While you're helping the show, please right now tap that subscribe button, like, comment, maybe any questions on there you have about any of the stuff today. Do that, please. It would be very, very helpful to us, as it'll help us grow the show. Only goal of the show is to help get more information out there to coaches. We've talked about the great coaching shortage and teaching shortage across the country. We want to be a free resource to as many people as possible. So, Coach, like I said, I was really excited to have you on. I think really interesting experience. Coached offensive line, which love having offensive line guys on there, because Andy Reid says if you can coach offensive line, you can coach anything. And the fact that you've taken over a new program that was in a rebuild stage was very interesting. And the fact you have a strength conditioning background is very interesting, because a lot of people are kind of putting their plan together that way this time of year, and there's some people that are super qualified, and there's some people like myself that are relying on great information out there from other tremendous coaches to help our teams and help our athletes along. But before we get into the presentation, tell us a little bit about your football story and maybe how you got the coaching bug, as I believe, if I remember correctly from listening to you on Coach Tatum, you kind of started as a CSCS. So talk to us a little about that.
Yeah, 1,000%. First and foremost, thanks for having me on. It's always fun to hop on, these shows and podcasts and, talk the gospel that is known as football. But yeah, no, I definitely got my start as a CSCS. I got my start as a strength and conditioning coordinator, and we're actually going to talk about that in the little presentation that I have for you guys tonight. Definitely got to start in that, and I had zero intentions of really coaching on the sideline, calling plays, taking over any type of position group. I was happy with just, being a personal trainer and being, a strength coach. Like, that was my jam. I was happy with that. And something just happened. The bug just bit me, man. Like the football coaching bug just bit me. And, I ended up falling in love, with just the coaching side of things, on the football side. And, I played in high school, and, I got a football background, and, I was like, hey, let me give this football coaching thing a try outside of the weight room. And, as we're going to dive into my story a little bit tonight, I started off as a JV defensive coordinator, and from there, the rest was history. And, like I said, the bug just bit me.
I think a lot of times when you start on the defensive side, it's advantageous because it's very difficult. I was a freshman defensive coordinator my second year, and those are the great minds are on the defensive side. Us offensive guys like to wear visors and pretend we're smart, but there is a lot of smart guys on the defensive side. So, like I said, I was really interested to hear. I know a lot of coaches are out there A lot of coaches, I know myself before I was blessed to get the head job here, I think I got told no 10, 11, 12 times. And I know that can be really discouraging for guys.
Oh, yeah.
You put your heart and soul into it. You think this is going to be it. And you kind of get pushed down the totem pole a little bit. So talk to us about elevating your career and share your screen. And I'm going to shut up and turn it over to you. And I'll ask questions as you kind of go through. So.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right, well, let me go ahead and present this. Coach, just so I'm sure, you are seeing my screen, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, awesome, because I know technology can be a pain sometimes.
I love that
All right.
by the way.
Oh yeah, dude, man, the purple tiger is something, isn't it? Man, I'm from down south where, the Clemson Tigers are big. Like this is, you look at the Clemson Tiger and the LSU Tiger, and man, that purple tiger is just something different. There's a bunch of tigers everywhere, but I always like to say there's only one purple tiger, and man, we have a hell of a logo, and I'm so proud of that logo. I love that logo. So cool. All right, let's dive into it, guys. All right, so tonight we're going to be talking about elevating your career. It's that time of year where a lot of coaches I know, you're looking for that next gig. You're looking for that next opportunity. You're looking for, that next spot to show that you can hang, with the big guys or what might have you. But tonight I really want to show you guys how I went from just being this personal trainer turned strength coach into a head coach, up here in Cortland, New York. So a little bit about me, I'm the head coach here at Cortland High School here in Cortland, New York. If you don't know where we are, we're about 40 minutes right outside of Syracuse. So we're right down the road from Fran Brown and his crew up in Syracuse. We play Section 3 ball, and my folks in New York, what I'm talking about. New York is a pretty big state, and it's separated between, I want to say, about 10 sections. This is my first year in New York, so I'm still really learning who's in what section. We're in Class B, so if any college coaches are recruiting New York, come on down to Cortland and, see us. Like I said, we're in Section 3, so if you're in charge of Section 3, come on down to Cortland. We got a bunch of talent down here. Syracuse kind of overshadows Cortland sometimes, but that's okay. But I've been coaching for about a decade, between being a strength coach, offensive line coach, run game coordinator, head coach, DFC, like you name it. I've been coaching for about a decade. I've coached everywhere from South Carolina, which is where I'm from and which is where my accent is from. My wife and I, we moved on up to the 302 up in Delaware, where I coached for about 2 to 3 years. And then I was blessed to receive an opportunity to, coach at the college level at a JUCO in New Jersey called Sussex Community College, which I enjoyed my time there coaching up under James Robertson, who is a wonderful defensive-minded coach. So big shout out to him. And, little did I know, I was going to make my way up here to snowy New York, where, by the way, it's supposed to be a wind chill of negative 29 tomorrow. So if you're in New York listening to this, bundle up. So it's about to be cold up here. So made my way up here to New York because my wife is actually from Cortland. She was born and raised in Cortland, New York. Both of her parents actually worked in the school district up here in Cortland, New York. Her dad was a principal. Her mom was a administrative assistant. Her family is a very well-known family up here in Cortland, New York, and a very loved family. And they saw the last name Barfield, and they're like, we don't know any Barfields. And I go, well, plenty of Caustics. I can guarantee you that. And I say that K name, and everybody says nothing but good things about my in-laws. So I'm very blessed on both ends. Moved on up to New York, where I took over the head coaching role here at Cortland High School. But here's the thing. I've worked a wide variety of jobs and roles. And this is really how I got my start. And I love these photos. Like, these are some photos of a young buck, man. Like, I was in my early 20s here. Some of you, like, if you're watching this video, some of you might see the beard and you go, oh, there's a classic Barfield beard. I know I don't have it right now because I shaved it off about a week or so ago, but I usually have a pretty nice beard going on. But yeah, I got my start as a strength and conditioning coordinator. I worked with all of the athletes at Trinity Collegiate School down in Darlington, South Carolina. Trinity Collegiate School is a college prep school down in South Carolina who, has a great culture down there. I coached up under Jared and Mel for several years. He was the AD there, and he trusted me to, handle all of the athletes within the athletic department. And man, I had a blast working, with all of those athletes. I was talking at the beginning of the episode. I didn't have any intentions of really, being on the sideline or, holding a clipboard or anything like that. And he came to me one day and he goes, I think you need to give the football thing a try. And I go, okay, let's give it a try. His junior varsity squad, which is down in South Carolina at the prep level, junior varsity is middle school. So it was like my middle school junior varsity team, it needs a defensive coordinator. Already have a head coach, already have an OC. I just need a guy to run the defense. I think it'll be a good start for you. First year in it, man, I tell you what, I had a blast. I was like, man, I love this. How can I immerse myself into this even more? Fortunately, that very next season, Jared, blessed me with the opportunity to, become the junior varsity head coach, as well as help with a lot of the analyst side of things on the varsity level, such as helping, break down film, helping the O-line coach and D-line coach there, helping him out however needed, helping the DC out however needed. He really just moved me more into an analyst role where I could really cut my teeth more. I was also fortunate to be the Dean of Student Athletes for my last year down in Trinity Collegiate, and, I got to see the administrative side of things. I do have a master's in athletic administration, and, I was able to see more of the administrative side of coaching and the administrative side of athletics. So, I was blessed with that opportunity. But I've also been able to, play some big roles. I think in all of my years of just bouncing states and trying to find that next big role, I've kind of taken everything, that I learned and bundled it all together. But some big roles that I've had, I've been offensive line and run game coordinator at several different programs. I've been the recruiting and college coordinator at several different programs as well. I've been the director of football operations whenever I was at Sussex Community College. Coach Robinson named me the DFO, which I will tell you what, being a DFO at the college level while also coaching the O-line, while also over the run game, while also being the strength coach, man, I tell you what, a full plate I had in that DFO role, it really pushed my patience. It really pushed my abilities, and it really pushed, how bad I wanted to be in this profession. I will say that's probably the most challenging job outside of a head football coach's role. So if you ever find yourself in the director of football operations role, know two things. You're going to work your butt off, and whoever gave you that spot trusts you. All right, so just understand those two things. I've also been blessed to be named associate and assistant head coach at the high school level down in Delaware. Then, finally I made it to the big show, if you will, to the big song and dance, and I was finally named head football coach here in Cortland this past summer. So I've been doing a lot of big roles, but everybody loves to ask me, how did you get here? And that's what I'm here to talk about tonight. How to go from, experienced fish to a fish who knows how to swim with the current now, right? How did I get here? I took on tasks that nobody was doing. I think that was one of the biggest things that I did. Whenever my wife and I moved up to Delaware, and I was coaching at Delaware Military Academy in Wilmington, Delaware, up under Nick Lincoln. I came in and I automatically just started looking for things to do. I started looking at, ways to contribute. I was not afraid of taking on duties and jobs and tasks. One thing that I really discovered was, whenever you can find a way to obtain skills, for specific jobs or for specific roles, you're really becoming an asset to that head coach. And that was one thing that I became so proud of, whenever I was a assistant coach, I became an asset. And a lot of times whenever people look at my resume, they'll see, oh, you're the O-line coach. Oh, you were the run game coordinator. Oh, man, you were also the recruiting coordinator. Oh, man, you're also the strength and conditioning coach. Why were you doing all these things? It's because I found ways to become valuable. I've simply found ways to become an asset to the head coach because I was never afraid of taking on a task that nobody wanted to do. I came into DMA and, typically at the high school level, the head coach is handling the recruiting and whatnot. But I came into DMA and, I learned up under a guy at Trinity Collegiate named Colin Renner, shout out to him. He taught me so much about being an asset to a head coach and being valuable. I came in and I was like, Coach, let me just handle the recruiting. Let me get it off of your plate. Let me help push that more. Let me take over the strength and conditioning program. Let me handle that more. I know you want me to be the O-line guy and the run game guy, but let me handle these things. Let me take it off of your plate. So one thing I really did was, I became an asset. I found ways to obtain skills. And then, whenever I moved on over to Thomas McCain up under Avery McMillan, which was also in Wilmington, Delaware, I picked up the same task. I came on over, from Delaware Military Academy to Thomas McCain, and it was basically I'm just taking, the same titles and just wearing a different logo at that point. And one of the big things that I was always proud of was my ability to be an asset. I keep on bringing that word up, and you guys are going to hear that word. You guys are going to hear that word a lot tonight. Excuse me. Another big thing that I really did was I made as many connections as possible. I do have a business background, being a former personal trainer and whatnot. One thing that I really believe in business and in football is the more connections you make, the higher you're going to climb. The more hands you're going to shake, the more people you meet, the more people that you listen to, the more people you learn from, the more people you just sit down and connect with. That's going to help your career a lot, and that helped mine. So one thing I always believe in, and I tell every young coach I talk to this, and I'm still a young coach. I'm 33, I'm not up there in age yet, so I'm still a young coach. But anytime I hear, coaches in their early 20s and they're trying to get an OC job, or, they're trying to get a DC job, or even a head coaching job, one thing I always tell them is skills over titles. And I know this is super hard for a lot of young coaches because, you want to be the guy. You want to be the guy calling the shots. You want to be the guy calling the plays. You want to be, the guy calling the coverages and the schemes and making the big decisions, right? But if you're not ready for it, it does show. So why not develop the skills before you take over the title? So always skills over titles. One thing I really stopped doing was I stopped focusing on titles and positions, because I can't tell you the number of times whenever my wife and I decided to start moving back up north so she could be closer to her folks. We were looking in Delaware, at houses, and, I was looking in Delaware at coaching jobs, and, I saw this head coaching job and this OC job and, this job and that job. And, finally Nick Lincoln at DMA took a shot on me as the O-line and run game coordinator. But I'll tell you what, he took a really green coach. He took a coach who had no idea what he was doing, to be honest with you, and, gave him an opportunity. And, he let me show that I could swim. But here's the thing, if I was to get, let's say, an OC job or a head coaching job or a DC job or even a special teams coordinator job at that time, I wouldn't have been ready for it. But I was so obsessed with a title. I was so obsessed with, just having that OC or that DC or that HC next to my name that I kind of lost sight of the fact that you have to develop your skills first. You have to start developing skills such as breaking film down, how to recruit, how to have proper football operations, how to run a weight room, how to handle academics and culture. And every stop along my coaching career, I say that it all led here to Cortland. A lot of people, they ask me that question, like, what really led you here to Cortland, and like, how did you get this job in Cortland, and how did you prepare for this job in Cortland? I tell people all the time, every stop that I had prepared me, from my very first job at Trinity Collegiate to my last job at Sussex Community College. It prepared me for so much. Just from different aspects. I will say the Trinity Collegiate job, it prepared me as a strength coach. It prepared me, as, a film analyst type of guy. Then I went over to DMA. That prepared me as a recruiting guy and an academics and culture guy. And then whenever I went over to Thomas McCain, I learned how to work, with an environment that really comes from a low economic status, such as we do here in Cortland. Cortland doesn't have the best economic status in the state of New York. I learned how to handle that by being at Thomas McCain. Then whenever I went over to, Sussex County, one thing I learned is the operations side of football, how to, prepare for travel, how to fundraise, how to create funds, how to, look at the big picture and not just what's coming up Friday or Saturday night, but what's coming in the next 5 years. And attaining those skills, can sometimes be complicated, can sometimes be hard. But some of the easiest ways you can sometimes some of the easiest ways you can obtain those skills is by just connecting with coaches. I talked about connections, a few minutes ago, and I'm saying it again. The more you can connect with coaches, the more you can, interact on Twitter or X, or the more you could come on these podcasts or listen to these podcasts and shows, the more you can go to, seminars and clinics and shake hands and, just have valuable conversations and just connect with coaches. That's how you get those skills. And one thing I want the really young coaches to know is be okay with being wrong. I tell people all the time that I have no issue with being wrong because I've been wrong more times than I've been right, and that's what's got me here today. So sometimes being wrong is an asset. Sometimes being wrong is an okay thing because you're learning something. If you stop learning in this profession, you're going to be behind. If you stop learning in this profession, you're really not going to get anywhere. One thing I always say is be the listener in the room. Anytime I'm at a clinic, anytime I'm in like a group call on Zoom with a bunch of coaches, anytime I'm on Twitter, if somebody corrects me, I give them the opportunity to show me like a different way, a different perspective. Show me like, hey, coach, you're looking at this the wrong way. Cool, show it to me. Like teach me something. That's one thing I always tell or ask coaches to do. Whenever they don't agree with me on something, if it's a concept or a scheme or a play, cool, teach me something. Like, okay, like I hear you. You think I'm wrong. Teach me something. And that's not me being egotistical or cocky or anything like that. It's just me being the listener in the room because I always want to learn. If you are okay with being wrong, and if you're okay with being the listener in the room, you will always obtain the skills you need to get to the head coach level, the offensive coordinator level, the defensive coordinator level, the special teams coordinator level. Also, connect with people who are where you desire to be. One of the biggest things I've ever learned in business is get in the room with people who are where you want to be, because obviously they've done what you're trying to do and they have the knowledge, they have the skills, they have the experience, and they have the connections that you need to get to where you want to be. And once again, there's that C word, the importance of connections. Find a way in the room by all means. Treat everyone as an equal from top to bottom. This industry is super small. This industry, everybody knows everybody. And prime point, eventually, at some point, my head coach, James Robertson, at Sussex County Community College, and my former head coach at Delaware Military Academy, Nick Lincoln, found a way to connect with one another, and it had nothing to do with me. They found a way to connect with one another, and now we have mutuals, right? So you never know whenever a connection is going to be made, and they know you. You never know whenever a connection is going to be made, and it might influence your opportunity to get a job, your opportunity to get a promotion, and so forth. All right, so always treat everyone as an equal, from the head guy to the, if you're at the college level, the GA, right? You always want to treat everybody the same, because at the end of the day, in this profession, it's a small world. It's a small knit circle. Coaches know coaches. We all know one another. We all talk. We all connect. This is a brotherhood. So treat everyone that you encounter as an equal from top to bottom. If you were to meet a GA from the University of Idaho, you better treat him the same way that you would treat Nick Saban if he was to walk into your living room as well. Because I just believe it's like the old saying goes, you treat the superintendent and the janitor the same, because you never know whenever you need something. Right? So you never know where people will end up in this profession, and don't come off as desperate or selfish, especially whenever you meet a head coach at a college and, you're a high school guy. I I have a young guy on my staff right now named Mike Guido. Shout out to him. He's a wonderful young man. He's 23. I gave him the opportunity to run special teams last year and did a wonderful job. He also works with our wide receivers. And every time we go somewhere, if it's a clinic or something like that, he carries himself like a coach who's been in the profession for 10 years instead of 3 years. And he impresses me every time, because anytime we meet a coach from a college, he never comes off as desperate. He never comes off as selfish whenever he's asking questions. He comes off as somebody who cares about this profession and cares about the brotherhood that is coaching. So young coaches, please take after Mr. Guido. Wear multiple hats. This is one thing that I always pride myself in, and this isn't just as a football coach, this is as a person. All right? Don't just claim you are a blank guy. I can't tell you the amount of times I hear people say, "Oh man, I'm just a receiver guy," or "Oh man, I'm just a receiver coach. I don't know nothing about the run game. I'm just a receiver guy." Or, "Hey, I don't know anything about stunts up front. I just work with the DBs." Never be that guy. Always try to be the guy that wants to learn. Hey, if you're the DB coach, learn the stunts. If you're the run game coordinator, learn the pass game. If you're I don't care if you're the offensive tackle coach and that's your primary job, why don't you just go ahead and take the extra time and learn the passing game? Because guess what? That's going to get you the jobs such as run game coordinator, pass game coordinator, special teams coordinator. And eventually that's going to show you can do more than just coach one position group. And that means you're going to become a valuable asset. There's that A word again. But how to manage it all? Because this is one question I get all the time. And anytime, coaches, they learn about my background, this is usually their first question. Like, how did you manage all those titles? And, truth be told, I had to have a cutoff point with myself, because you don't want to overload yourself with too much. While I'm sitting here saying, hey, become an asset and try to juggle every role and responsibility that you can, don't overload yourself with too much, because it does become a juggling act. And I promise you, the days and the nights will get long. And, it shows you're hard to replace. I've been using the word asset a lot tonight. And, I truthfully believe if you show, hey, if you get rid of me, you now have to feel like you now have to hire 2 to 3 people to replace what I'm doing. If you can do that, it shows how valuable you are. It shows how hard you are to replace. All right. And also the lessons you learn during that time is worth it. And one thing I always believe in, and I say this as a head coach all the time, and I tell first year head coach, now that I'm wrapping up my first year, I can now talk to first year head coaches about this stuff. One thing I tell head guys who are trying to become a head coach, I always tell them, hey, your job isn't to know everything, but your job is to figure everything out. And what I mean by that is, it's not your job to come in knowing every single little answer to every single question that's going to be in front of you, but it is your job to find those answers. And a lot of it is just putting yourself through that grind, putting yourself through those situations where you're going to learn lessons, because the lessons are worth it at the end of the day. And talking about current day, I don't have it all figured out. I just launched a YouTube video today talking about my 0-8 season. And what I learned from it. I don't have it all figured out by any means, but I'm still here making as many connections as possible. That's why I'm on this podcast and show. I'm not on this podcast and show to be like, ooh, look at me. It's because the opportunity was put in front of me to come on this show, and I'm very grateful for it. And this is a way to connect with other coaches. This is another way to spread the gospel of football. This is another way to spread the knowledge to younger coaches. And truth be told, we're always just trying to find ways to get better. And this is primarily a message to my young coaches out there listening to this or watching this. I remember whenever I was your age, I remember whenever I was in my early 20s, and I thought I knew everything. I thought, oh man, I'm not getting this opportunity because, for example, in Delaware, I'll be honest, the Delaware coaching cycle, coaches like to rotate from school to school to school. So it's like the same head coaches, they just bounce around. I remember I interviewed for a head coaching job in Delaware at DMA because, Coach Lincoln, he had to step down due to some personal reasons. I threw my hat into the ring because I was like, hey, I'm a young coach. The kids love me. I have a great relationship. I'm doing all this recruiting stuff. I'm keeping the program going while we're in the search for a head coach. I'm going to interview for the job, and like I'm a shoo-in for the job. And they went with somebody else, who is Coach Carey, who's still at DMA and doing a wonderful job. Coach Carey's a Delaware guy through and through. He's from the 302. He played high school in the state of Delaware. Went on right up the road to play college ball at Penn, and came back to Delaware as an educator and as a ball coach. And he's just a Delaware guy. And Delaware schools love to keep Delaware guys in those head coaching roles. And whenever I got turned down, I was angry. Whenever I got turned down, I blamed it on the fact that I wasn't a Delaware guy. And little did I know, it was because I wasn't ready. And one thing I always say is God's timing is never wrong. I was not ready. I had to be patient. And, one thing that I think a lot of young coaches forget is if you're planning on being in this profession, you have a long road ahead of you. You have a long, long time in this profession, because it's not one of those things where, our playing career is anywhere from 4 to 15 years. Our coaching career can be as long as we want it to. It can be from 10 years to 40 years if we wanted to. So be patient. You have time. Be valuable. Be humble. That's a big one that I had to learn. Be humble. Be consistent. Always show up. If you're going to be the rah-rah loud guy, the motivational guy in the room, and that's going to be your personality as a coach, be consistent, because programs love to see you be consistent. Always show up and always protect your why. A big reason why I coach is because a lot of my coaches growing up were my father figures. And outside of my grandfather, I didn't have a father growing up. My dad was in and out of jail. My dad was a drug addict. My dad was an alcoholic as well. And, my coaches were legit like my uncles and my big brothers. And, they were, my father figures. My D-line coach, Jameson Eastep, who's now the head coach at my high school, which I love that for him because he's been there forever. He was 23. My senior year, he was 23. So he was like a big brother to me. And, I think back to our relationship all the time as a head coach now and as a coach just in general. And I remember how I always felt like I can turn to him. I always felt like, he had my back. And that's my why. I want to be that for my guys. So always protect your why. And last but not least, this is one thing I had to learn the hard way, and bless my wife. I love her to death. She is my rock. She keeps me grounded. She keeps me, laser focused whenever, I can't see the road for the trees. But football will take everything if you let it. It will take everything away from you. So make sure it also gives something back, because I know so many coaches, and I'm glad that, this culture is changing a little bit, especially at the college level. So many coaches will spend countless hours in the office watching film. They'll watch the same film 100,000 times. They'll sit in the office forever and ever, drawing up plays, trying to find the perfect scheme, trying to find the perfect edge. And they let football take so much from them that they forget to get something back from it too. And, it's okay to get something back from football, because we pour so much time, so much energy, and so much effort into this sport that we got to get something back sometimes too. Coaches, just really quick before, we talk more ball or whatever, this is a way you can connect with me. My email is coachmikebarfield@gmail.com. My Twitter or X is @_Coach Barfield. My Instagram is @Coach Mike Barfield. Pretty simple handles. If there's anything I can ever do for you, always hit me up. I'm always in your corner. I'm always willing to talk ball, talk strength and conditioning, talk building programs, and just talk about building better young men, because Lord knows this world needs it.
Coach, I can't thank you enough. There was a ton of great information. All you coaches, young and old, and somewhere in between, make sure there was a lot of really, really good stuff in there in that presentation, kind of talking to this coaching profession. I do think we're blessed. I think it's a wonderful profession, but there's a lot of wisdom in that, Coach. And while we have you, I wanted to make sure we talk a little bit about strength conditioning. I was just curious. I've asked this to a few of the coaches we have on, and the answers have been similar in this regard. But my question is, what do you think, and I think it gives you a big advantage with your program at Cortland, having that S&C background, but what do you think coaches get wrong in their strength and conditioning programs?
Man, I think the biggest thing that a lot of coaches get it wrong is they treat kids like bodybuilders. They treat kids like powerlifters. They don't treat kids like athletes. Just from my experience, I think there is a certain type of blend that you need for athletes. I always say that if you can marry the bodybuilding world and the powerlifting world, you pretty much get the athletic coaching world or the athletic training world. I see so many coaches have so much volume within their programming that it's really just tearing the kids' muscular structure down more than helping it. Then, I see coaches, they have their kids going heavy all the time and never pulling off the gas. There's just so much unstable structure whenever it comes to programming, and it's not consistent enough, and, it's not organized enough to where it benefits the athlete.
I think there's a ton of, we've heard volume has been a really common answer. A lot of guys seem to kind of overload the volume train, and that I'm, big feed the cats guy. So I love hearing that stuff there that way. A couple other questions before we get you out of here, Coach. As you're kind of building your system, and I really enjoy following you on Twitter, X, there's so much great info out there that I love getting to see it all. I'm a huge podcast listener of all the great information out there from coaches, but kind of talked about blending your system and changing it a little bit here. The presentation you did on Coach Tatum's was excellent. I really enjoyed it. But what do you think is most important when you're taking over a program in terms of that? Do you think it's most important for coaches to coach what they know, try to build the scheme around the players, somewhere in between? And what I mean by that is, if you've been a wing T guy your whole life, I don't know that you're going to come in and effectively implement the air raid, even if you have great air raid kids or whatever. I think at the high school level, there is a little bit of a fallacy in that regard on what type of, you have this kid or you have that kid. I usually think a lot of versatile athletes, there's a lot of kids that can do a number of things. And kids are really smart. They can pick up on a lot of things as well. But what do you think is most important, to coach what you know or to kind of match your scheme to the talents of your players?
Man, that's a wonderful question, and I've been doing a lot of self-reflecting. As you could probably tell in Tatum's video, and if you've watched my YouTube video that I posted today, I've been doing a lot of self-reflecting after the season, and I've been saying all off season that where I went wrong was I didn't go to the double wing soon enough, and I didn't stick with it soon enough. While I've been blessed to coach in the double wing, I know the double wing. I've played in the triple option. I've coached in power spread offenses and RPO offenses before, so I understand how to coach them. Truth be told, it's not my bread and butter. Power spread is not my bread and butter. More double wing, more triple options, more my bread and butter. I think it's important to look at what you have and always build around what you have. Jared Amell, my head coach from Trinity, that was the first lesson he ever taught me, as a coach. Because I remember playing his day, we were struggling blocking up front whenever I was the JV head coach, and we were struggling blocking up front. And the guy that I had running the offense at the time, he was like, let's move the quarterback into pistol. And I told, Coach Amel about it, and Amel was like, nah, it's not going to work. He's like, I promise you it's not going to work. And he was like, look, you build your offense around what you have. Because I was also trying to vouch for, I was spreading it out a little bit more on varsity because we had two wonderful athletes in Reggion Bennett and Trey McLeod that season. And I was like, Coach, we got D1 guys, legit D1 guys who are playing D1 ball at the next level. Let's put Trey out at receiver. Reggion can stay at back. Carter, who was our quarterback that year, he could handle, slinging the pill around a little bit. He was like, once again, he was like, no, Coach. He's like, you build around what you have. It was quarterback-wise, we can't handle the spread. He was like, just trust me. So ever since then, I've kind of lived and died by that in a way. You always build around what you got. You always build around what you have. Truth be told, I came into Cortland seeing what I had. And I was like, oh, I got a quarterback with a decent arm, solid arm. I got a receiver who runs a true 4.5. He's a track guy. He could jump out of the basketball arena. Like, he's an all-state high jumper. I got two other receivers who are track guys and pretty quick. We could probably make the power spread game work a little bit up here in Cortland, and just couldn't get it to click. We switch over to the double wing, and all of a sudden, hey, we're actually hanging on into ball games. We didn't win a game, unfortunately, but we're actually competing in games now. We're actually putting points up. We're actually putting up rushing numbers. And it's like, oh, man, we should have switched to this all along. So, to give you a long answer short, I think it's a good blend. I think you got to build around what you got, but I also think you got to try to stick with what you know and kind of blend them together.
Great answer, Coach. I love it. One of the teams that was in our region, they very quickly turned from an air raid team. Following year, they had a new head coach. They started running double tight, double wing. They went from like 2-8 to, I think they won the region 2 years in a row. Mm-hmm. And a large part of it, and I can tell you this firsthand, so hard to practice. Because when you see 3x1, 2x2 week after week, your scout team gets pretty good. They're, zone bubble. Okay, we can run this counter, When you ask them to go double tight, double wing, take the snap under center, toss, flip, super power, all that stuff, you can't get a look worth a darn. And then you get to Friday night, and all of a sudden you're getting mashed. I'm telling you right now, I've coached for a long time. I don't know if this is part of your offense or not, but the double tight, double wing in the gun with the sniffer fullback where you direct snap it and wedge it to the fullback, I don't think we ever stopped that play for less than 10 yards. I really don't. I was like, and I would always like, oh, it's coming. And then every single time they snuck it in on us, really great stuff. So I am super looking forward to following your success at Cortland. And thank you so much for being on the show. I really, really appreciate it. Any closing thoughts you want to give us, we would be welcome to.
Yeah, man, 1,000%. I appreciate you guys having me on, and I've kind of already spoke my piece to the younger coaches. I want to speak my piece to the older coaches now. I know this profession is a band of brotherhood, but same time, give young guys opportunities. I think about Mike Guido a lot. My receiver coach and special teams guy. He's a young guy. He's cutting his teeth right now in the industry, and he's proven his worth. There's a lot of young talent out there that does deserve the opportunity and does deserve the chance. And I'm not saying, hey, hand the keys to the offense over to the young guy on your staff. I'm saying, why not pull him up under your wing and teach him? Why not, give him an opportunity in practice to, call the offense, for a series. Let him show you what you can do. Because I will say, I've been blessed with a lot of mentors, and every mentor that I've had, they've given me that blessing. They've given me that opportunity. They've said, hey, I want to give you this shot to show me what you can do, and so you can learn. And just understand that, somebody has to take over the mantle once you retire. And, why not just go ahead and start grooming them now? So that's my message to the old coaches. If you got a young guy on staff, take him up under your wing, teach him everything you know, and, make another hell of a coach, because Lord knows this industry needs them.
They absolutely do. I just got a text from a guy that played for us and then coached for us, became a D coordinator at a pretty successful school in our part of town, and he was really, really thankful, and all the credit goes to him in that regard. But I'll tell you right now, I made my entire day getting that text. So that's all really super cool stuff, Coach. Like I said, super excited to watch you continue to build the program at Cortland. And love the stuff you're doing with your nutrition bar. I forgot, I think it's the Tiger's Den. I could be mistaken.
Yeah, Tiger Den. Yeah, Tiger Den. Yeah, Tiger Den.
Great idea. Absolutely love that. And thank you so much for joining us. We will see everybody again next time for another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show.